Hello everybody! Today we're going to be learning how to use dashes, commas and brackets for parenthesis. For this lesson you will need a pen or a pencil and your exercise book or some paper. Pause the video and get everything you need in front of you. When writing, you can add parenthesis to the middle of a sentence to add extra information or as an afterthought. Parenthesis is when a word, phrase or clause is inserted into the sentence. They are sometimes known as embedded clauses or relative clauses. In the sentence on your screen now, you can see my main clause. My dog loves long walks by the river. The parenthesis has been placed in the middle of the sentence after the subject of my sentence, dog, as that's what it's giving more information about. You could think about it as a sandwich. The parenthesis here is the filling that goes between the two slices of bread. In my example, I have used brackets to separate the parenthesis from the main clause. We will talk more about punctuation for parenthesis as we go through the video. What is important though is that if I took the parenthesis away, the sentence would still make complete sense on its own. All that parenthesis is doing is giving me a little bit more information. There are three possible ways to punctuate parenthesis. You can use dashes, commas or brackets. You can see with my example how I punctuate that when it's inserted in the middle of my main clause. Remember, if I take out the parenthesis and punctuation, the main clause remains and still makes complete sense. The parenthesis is just adding some extra information to my subject. As we've just discussed, you can use three different types of punctuation for parenthesis. However, you should use different punctuation for parenthesis depending on the type of writing you are doing. For example, dashes are used in informal writing where your audience is someone you know well. For example, it might be that you're writing to yourself, your family or your friends. This could include a diary entry or a letter, note, postcard to a family member or best friend. Commas and brackets are more likely to be used in more formal writing where you don't know your audience at all or very well. For example, if you were writing a newspaper report, a letter to someone of authority like a politician or head teacher. Parenthesis can go in different positions of a sentence. What is important is that it comes after whatever it is you are adding extra information to. Punctuation for parenthesis often comes in pairs, as we looked at just now. Remember, you can use a pair of brackets, dashes or commas before and after the extra information or afterthought. This can be embedded within the main clause. However, if you want to use your parenthesis at the end of your sentence, then it must be brackets as a pair. You cannot add a pair of dashes or commas at the end of a sentence. If you want to use other punctuation at the end of your sentence, you must only use one dash or comma before the extra information and a full stop after it. For example, on your screen you can see my example. At the top, I moved to Bristol in 2011 and then I have a pair of commas for my parenthesis at the age of 6 and my full stop is at the end. However, in my second example, I wanted to use a dash. So I have my main clause, I moved to Bristol in 2011, dash, add my afterthought at the age of 6, full stop. There is no need for another dash. Okay, well done everyone. Hopefully you're feeling like an expert in parenthesis now. Okay, let's see how well you understand parenthesis. In a minute, I'd like you to copy the sentences into your book and underline the parenthesis in each sentence. Remember to look out for the different punctuation of dashes, commas or brackets, and also remember to look out for the main clause and the extra information or the afterthought. That will help you. Okay, I've also added a star challenge at the bottom then on number 5, which is slightly trickier to try and test your brain. Okay, are you ready? Pause the video and off you go. Well done everyone. Let's see how you got on. We will mark it together. Remember to tick if you're right and then correct any marvellous mistakes. Sentence number 1. The parenthesis is the one who lives in Australia. That's giving extra information to the subject, brother, and if you take it out, the sentence still makes sense. Sentence 2, the parenthesis is the tallest mountain in the UK. That's giving us extra information about Ben Nevis, but is not essential to the sentence making sense. Sentence number 3, the afterthought is at the end here in 1969, adding extra information but not needed. And sentence number 4, known as the red planet is the parenthesis, giving us extra information about the subject Mars, but again, if we take it out, the sentence still makes sense on its own. How did you get on with question number 5? I put this as a star challenge because it was slightly trickier. Because if you look, you can see there's a comma and a dash, which might be confusing to some people. The reason why there's a comma though is because that's a fronted adverbial in the summer holidays. That's nothing to do with parenthesis. The capital of Spain is the afterthought, is adding extra information to the subject, that's Madrid. So the parenthesis comes at the end of that sentence. Well done if you got that one right. Just make sure when you're marking it that when you've underlined the parenthesis, you've also underlined the punctuation. That's really important. Okay, so now you can identify parentheses in a sentence. We're going to see if you can add the correct punctuation for parenthesis. So what you need to do is think about the part of the sentence that's adding extra information that is not part of the main clause. Which part can you take out and the sentence still makes sense? Remember to think about which punctuation for parenthesis is the most appropriate to use. We'll focus on this a bit more later on, but it's worth thinking about. Okay, when you're ready, copy and complete the sentences. How did you get on? I'm going to mark them together now, remembering to tick the ones you've got right and correcting any marvellous mistakes. You may have used different punctuation to me, which we'll talk about at the end. So sentence number 1, the parenthesis is at 10 a.m. each day. That's adding extra information to the monkey's feeding time. I've used dashes. You may have used commas or brackets and it would still be okay. Question number 2, the parenthesis is full of many rare plants and animals because that's adding extra information to the rainforest. Again, you may have used brackets or dashes and it would still make sense. You probably, for question number 2, if you're thinking about formality, you probably wouldn't use dashes because that's more likely to be in a report that you might be writing to someone that you don't know. Okay. Question number 3, the parenthesis is at the end of our sentence. Recycling, reuse and walk rather than drive is adding extra information to us helping the environment. Now you can see that I've used a pair of brackets and it's really important to note that my full stop is outside of the brackets. Okay, you could have used one single dash after the word environment. Okay, that would still work. Question number 4, the parenthesis is Leon Bright because that's adding extra information to Tom's best friend. Okay, I've used brackets. Again, you could probably use dashes or commas here because it's embedded. And question number 5, the parenthesis is about 10 miles. It's adding extra information to how far Gemma's family have walked. Because the parenthesis is at the end of the sentence, I can't use a pair of dashes or a pair of commas, so I've used one dash. You could, like sentence number 3, use a pair of commas as well. How did you all get on with that? It is very important when we're using parenthesis that we put the extra information in the right place in the sentence. This should come after the subject that you are adding extra information about. For example, if you look on my screen now, my main clause is Cornwall is very popular with tourists. That makes sense on its own, but I want to add some extra information about Cornwall. So my afterthought is located in the southwest of England. I'm giving some extra information to where Cornwall is. So this needs to go after the subject I'm talking about, in this case Cornwall. Therefore, my new sentence is Cornwall, comma, located in the southwest of England, comma, is very popular with tourists. Because this parenthesis is embedded in the middle of the main clause, I can use any of the 3 punctuation types. However, if I was thinking about my audience, this would probably be more likely in a formal piece of writing, And for that reason, I would probably use brackets or commas. It's very important when we're using parenthesis that we put the extra information in the right place in the sentence. This should come after the subject that you are adding extra information about. For example, if you look at your screen, my main clause here is Cornwall is very popular with tourists. That makes sense on its own, but I want to add some extra information about Cornwall. My afterthought is located in the southwest of England. This needs to go after the subject I am talking about. In this case, that's Cornwall. Therefore, my new sentence with parenthesis is Cornwall, comma, located in the southwest of England, is very popular. How confident are you feeling with parenthesis now? Let's test that out. On your screen now, you can see my 5 written sentences using parenthesis. I'd like you to decide if I've used the punctuation for parenthesis accurately. In a minute, copy and complete the sentences, writing correct or incorrect next to them. If they are incorrect, can you write them correctly? Okay, when you're ready, pause the video and off you go. Great work, everyone. Let's see how you did. Remember to tick the ones you got right and correct any marvellous mistakes. Question number 1 is correct because the parenthesis is explaining what UFO stands for. I've got a pair of brackets and I've got my full stop outside of my bracket, so that's right. Question number 2 is incorrect. If I take out the parenthesis that I've said it is, the sentence would read, Shelley of the team is a very skillful player. Now that doesn't make sense. So my parenthesis actually is not quite in the right place. The parenthesis is the captain of the team, because if I take that out, I'm left with Shelley is a very skillful player, and that makes sense. So hopefully you realise that your sentence should say Shelley dash the captain of the team dash is a very skillful player. Sentence number 3 is correct. The parenthesis is the patron saint of England, and that's added extra information to St George, and I've got a pair of commas embedded within the sentence. Question number 4 is incorrect. I have used a pair of dashes at the end of my sentence, and we know that if I want to use a dash for an afterthought, I use 1, not 2. Have a look there at the end where I have a dash and a full stop. It just doesn't look right. So you should have corrected it to Chester Zoo was opened many years ago, dash, in 1931, full stop. And lastly, number 5 is incorrect. If I take the parenthesis out and read the sentence, it says, dog, a spaniel, loved playing with his bone. Now that just doesn't make sense. The extra information is about the dog, which I'm explaining that is a spaniel. So a spaniel is the parenthesis. So your sentence should read, Jay's dog, bracket, a spaniel, bracket, loved playing with his bone. How did you get on? Okay, now let's see if you can add some parenthesis to a sentence of your own. In a minute, I would like you to look at each sentence and work out which part of the sentence you would like to add extra information to. Remember to add the correct punctuation and to put the parenthesis in the appropriate place in the sentence. Okay, are you ready? Pause the video and start it again when you have finished. How do you think you got on with that? Now this is a tricky one to mark as you will all have used different additional information in different points of the sentence. So you may need someone at home to have a little look through this with you. For example, you've probably, for sentence number 1, added some extra information to lions, but you also could have added an afterthought at the end to Africa. Okay, can you check that with somebody at home? Well done everyone, we're nearly at the end of our lesson. Before we finish, let's check you can spot where we should use parenthesis to help organise our writing. Look at the question on your screen now. Which 2 of the sentences would be clearer if brackets were used to organise the information. I have a top tip for you. Look out for the main clause. What can you take out and it will still make sense on its own? Okay, pause the video and restart when you're ready. Okay, well done everybody. If we go down the list, hopefully you saw that sentence 1 doesn't need any brackets for it to make sense. Sentence number 2 does need brackets to help organise the information. The main clause is the 2 cars sped down the road. So a red one and a blue one are adding extra information to those 2 cars, so I should have brackets around that part. If we go down to sentence number 3, that doesn't need any brackets to help organise the information. The same for question number 4, that's fine on its own. But question number 5 has added extra information about Jake. A polite young man should be in brackets because the main clause is Jake always holds open the door. How did you get on with that? Okay everyone, last question before our hinge. Look at the sentences on your screen. Which 2 of the sentences use punctuation to show parenthesis? You need to look very carefully. Pause the video and restart when you're ready. Okay, so to get the mark for this question, you needed to tick 2. So if you've ticked sentence number 1 and sentence number 3, well done, you are correct. If I take out the parenthesis on those 2 sentences, the main clause still makes sense on its own. But why are the other 2 incorrect? Be really careful with sentence number 2 because if you look quickly, you can see a pair of commas. However, the pair of commas do not play the role of parenthesis. If I took out "we move the chairs," it would say "to make space, tables and the boxes of games." Well, that doesn't make sense. What's happening here is we have "to make space," we moved the chairs, comma, tables and the boxes of games. So we have commas for a list, not commas for parenthesis. And if you look at the last question, there is 1 comma. Now we know that we could use a comma if it was at the end of our sentence. However, on Tuesday is a fronted adverbial, so it's playing the role of a fronted adverbial, not parenthesis. How did you get on with that? Well done everyone, you've worked really hard today. Before we finish, let's check our learning. On your screen there's 4 sentences. What I'd like you to do is work out which one sentence has used parentheses correctly, and how do you know? I would also like you to explain why the other sentences do not use parentheses accurately. When you're ready, pause the video and restart when you have your answers. Okay, so hopefully you saw that sentence number 3 uses parentheses correctly. This is because brackets can be used in the middle of the sentence, and also the extra information goes after the part it's talking about. Huge amounts here is talking about a number, so following with a number makes sense. But why are the other sentences incorrect? Well, sentence number 1 uses dashes for parenthesis at the end of the sentence, and we know that you should only use 1 dash here. Sentence 4 is very similar, as they've used a pair of commas, and you cannot do that at the end of a sentence. Sentence 2 doesn't work because the parenthesis is in the wrong part of the sentence. You're not adding extra information about Britain specifically, you're adding extra information about how much of the food gets thrown away. So be very careful between question 2 and question 3. Well done everyone, you've worked really hard today. I can't wait to see you using parenthesis in your writing soon. See you next week.